Welcome back to another podcast within the leadership series with Kevin Sturlaugson. And today our subject is going to be about empowering your team members. So, when we talk about empowering your team members, this is coming from a focus of intent based leadership. I think many of you have probably heard that term. David Marquette has books out on it, which I recommend reading if you haven't. They are the way that you set your people up for success when you're trying to empower them. And without it, your teams will struggle. And so let's talk about what intent-based leadership really starts with as its framework. The first is you need to provide guidance to your staff members, your team members, and that guidance is giving them kind of the guardrails, the information that they need to know what are the bounds that they can operate in, what is the outcomes that you desire to achieve, um, and where their responsibility or their authority lies within that process. The second part is you need to provide them the context that's needed for them to be successful in making, in leading things and making decisions. That context, sometimes they don't have the visibility into holistically seeing what's going on throughout the organization or within the strategy spaces, within business, within the C suite, within IT. And therefore they need some additional context to have that holistic view that they don't have currently. And then finally it's providing them clarity. And that clarity is to make sure that there's no ambiguity, there's no uncertainty, making sure that they have a good grasp and understanding of what is expected and what is going on and what they need to achieve. So that sets the framework up of making sure that they're set up for success to be empowered. So now let's talk about what is empowerment for your team members. Well, one, it's your willingness to push decision making down to where the information is at. It's giving them room to fail and learn. We talked about it in the last podcast that you have to give them a safe environment to be able to fail and learn. And being empowered, many of them haven't been empowered before. So they're going to have some failure. They're going to have some learning curve that they have to go through. So you have to give them that room. Then it's about growing your leadership bench. You don't want to be the constraint, the bottleneck, the only one that is able to make decisions or get actions done within your organization or your team because others can't be entrusted to do so. You need to remove that constraint, remove that bandwidth issue by bringing others to the table that can be allowed to help take on some of that capability. And then you have to remember that you can give them the authority, you can give them the responsibility, but you can't give them the accountability. In the end, you as the leader have to maintain that you're accountable for whatever those team members do when they're empowered, which should be freeing to those employees to know that you're there to take the accountability if they do something that causes issues, incidents, problems for the environment. So with that, you also need to make sure you set up the bounds of to what extent are you willing to give authority and decision making and leadership to, right? Because there's some decisions or some activities at the leadership level that you don't want to push down because either it has a major impact to critical operations, to impact the business capabilities that are mission essential, or could be detrimental to that staff member's career. You don't want to put them in those predicaments. So you set up the clarity on where does that authority and responsibility end, where they have to escalate it up to you for support, but you need to make sure you're giving them, you know, proper bandwidth and proper authority to work at things at their level so they can build those muscles of leadership and decision making. Now, when we talk about challenges in empowerment, let's first talk about the leadership side of the house. A lot of times leaders are not willing to allow failure. They're afraid of failure themselves just as much as the employees are, the staff members. And so from that reservation of not wanting to fail, they don't want to empower employees because they know there's going to be a learning curve and there's going to be, sometimes there's going to be failure from that side or that depth that may not happen if they were the leader making that decision because they've done it before. They have experience in doing so. And so sometimes they're not willing to give up that safety net. And then there's leaders who want accolades. They want to be that bright shiny star that's always getting, the recognition for job well done. So they don't want to give up the decision making or the leadership capabilities because then they got to share some of that accolade or recognition. Now, granted, they could just let others make those decisions stuff and just cover it and say they did it themselves and still keep the accolades or recognition, but it starts getting harder when you let others have some of that time in the light, I guess you would say. And then some leaders are impatient. None of us, came to making decisions or being a leader right away. I think we talked about this before in other podcast series. So it's really about having that patience to let somebody learn, to let them become, that leader and that decision maker that they can be if they're given the opportunity to learn and grow. But some leaders, have that mentality of I can do it faster, so I'm just going to do it, which handcuffs your ability to really empower and grow your staff and your teams. So those are the critical ones in the leadership side. Let's talk about the staff related. So for most of your staff or team members, they have a fear of being provided this opportunity to lead and make decisions because for many of them it's the first time and they haven't done it before and they're uncomfortable. They're afraid that they might not do it right. And you know what? They probably are going to make mistakes. We're all human. We all have to learn through failure. So they have that fear of wanting to take on that yoke of responsibility and authority. They're also afraid that they don't understand how to make decisions at that level because they haven't done it before. They are afraid that they may choose the wrong one, which could be detrimental to the company and or the organization. And they don't want to do that. None of them, no employee or staff truly inherently wants to cause damage. They want to do right because they are part of that environment, part of that organization, and they want to see it prosper because they know if it prospers, they prosper. So for the staff, that's those are the critical things that make them be fearful of wanting to be empowered. And sometimes it'll cause it where they'll try and where you even try and empower them and they'll try and push back the decision back to you. They'll try and push it up to your level, even though you've given them the authority to do so. But you have to learn not to just take it over and make that decision for them. You need to help them learn how to make the decision themselves by pushing back to them and maybe giving them some other support. And so we talk about other support. Let's talk about coaching and mentoring because that's a way that you do that. Now, there are two succinct differences, right? So, coaching is really about not giving somebody the answer, but working with them to introspectively look through themselves on what do they already know? what information have they already leaned on to get to where they are, and maybe what are the gaps that they have to address. It's letting them understand what do they have to do to either bring clarity that they already can answer it, they just didn't feel comfortable doing so, and to gain their own comfortability in doing that, or the other is helping them identify what are the next steps they would have to do to be able to make that decision, and letting them learn how to assess that and do that themselves. And then mentoring is really letting them shadow you and understand how you operate, how you did things, how could they perform functions by seeing somebody else do it, right? So they're two different dichotomies. One is I want you to learn from yourself, and the other is I want you to learn from others. So when we talk about giving them support, if you go into the mentoring side of the house, set up a way for the employees that you want to empower, to give them authority to make decisions and lead. Let them shadow yourself or shadow some other uh, people in your organization that you feel will be a good example for them on what is your decision making process. How do you go about determining what is the best answer, right? Because there may not be a right or wrong, but it's what is the best option that's available, and then letting them learn from seeing it from how somebody else does it. You can sit there and do it through either an active decision that's having to be made at that time, or a activity that needs to be led at that time, or maybe it's taking something historically that you went through, that you have documented, that you can walk them through. Here was what was being done, why it was being done. Here was the information that was available, and here's how it was assessed and analyzed, and this is why this decision was made, or why we led in this direction. And then when it comes to the coaching, you know, set yourself up to be a coach for those that you're empowering for the first time. Let take the handcuffs off of them, let them run, but give them that ability to come back to you and check in with you. And you can give them introspective type questions where they can assess and analyze from what they already know, what information they've already gained, and do they already have everything they need to make that decision, or is there something else they need to go after to better prepare themselves to make it? And give them that guidance so they can learn on their own. A lot of people learn from doing it rather than reading it, right? So give them the opportunity to do it. So why do we want to empower our staff members and team members, right? What is the benefit of allowing an opportunity for growth, which may lead to some type of failure that will have to be, corrected and adjusted from? Why go through that? Well, one, it creates a higher performing team. You now have more leaders in your organization that can help, you know, increase the bench strength that you have to work with. The other thing is, in technology especially, they're very fast paced environments. So you need to have other people helping make decisions. You don't want to be that bottleneck or that constraint where everything has to be escalated up to you or up to some governance body. Now, granted, there's reasons for governance bodies, and there's certain decisions they have to make. So you don't cut them out. But what things can be delegated down, you delegate down, and that makes it where you can make decisions quicker, more efficiently, because the information, the decisions are being made where the information's at. So it's not gonna that information doesn't change. It goes up. It just creates delays, or somehow gets misguided or somewhat changed in its in its hand up through the different levels. So it makes sure you're making decisions based on true and accurate information in a quick manner. And then the final is you have improved morale. You now have a team that feels you trust them, that you're there to support them, and that they feel they can grow and they have opportunity to advance, and it may not be that they can advance into a higher position immediately or maybe not in the near future, but they know that you care enough about them to let them grow and have opportunities beyond just their normal, you know, being a wrench turner or doing the tasks that they do daily. So all those things together would give you, a great benefit on why you want to empower your teams. So I hope you found this podcast beneficial. I've used this format myself in how I've led teams, and I've had nothing but positive feedback from my staff members. And yeah, it can be a struggle, but it was worth the struggle, both for me and for the team members. So I recommend that you give the opportunity for those staff members and team members to grow and be empowered in that way. And you'll reap the rewards. So will the organization, and you'll be grateful for it. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions on either something you heard that either really resonated with you or you think should have further depth on that area of the context or information, or if you have other suggestions, please let me know. I would love to be able to make sure I'm providing podcasts that are beneficial, that provide value to the listeners. And other than that, I hope you have a great day and thank you for listening.